there's a simulation, so our mind is essentially a simulation.
Usually, I try to use the terminology so that the mind is basically the principles that produce the simulation. It's the software that is implemented by your brain.
Yeah.
And the mind is creating both the universe that we are in and the self, the idea of a person that is on the other side of attention and is embedded in this world.
Why is that important, that idea of a self? Why is that an important feature in the simulation?
It's basically a result of the purpose that the mind has. It's a tool for modeling, right? We are not actually monkeys. We are side effects of the regulation needs of monkeys. And what the monkey has to regulate is the relationship of an organism to an outside world that is in large part also consisting of other organisms. And as a result, it basically has regulation targets that it tries to get to. These regulation targets start with priors. They're basically like unconditional reflexes that we are more or less born with. And then we can reverse engineer them to make them more consistent. And then we get more detailed models about how the world works and how to interact with it. And so these priors that you commit to are largely target values that our needs should approach, set points. And this deviation to the set point creates some urge, some tension. And we find ourselves living inside of feedback loops, right? Consciousness emerges over dimensions of disagreements with the universe. Things where you care, where things are not the way they should be, where you need to regulate. And so in some sense, the sense self is the result of all the identifications that you're having. And identification is a regulation target that you're committing to. It's a dimension that you care about, that you think is important. And this is also what locks you in. If you let go of these commitments, of these identifications, you get free. There's nothing that you have to do anymore. And if you let go of all of them, you're completely free and you can enter nirvana because you're done.
I understand the self is an important part of the simulation, but why does the simulation feel like something?
So if you look at a book by, say, George R.R. Martin, where the characters have plausible psychology, and they stand on a hill because they want to conquer the city below the hill, and they're down in it, and they look at the color of the sky, and they are apprehensive and feel empowered and all these things. Why do they have these emotions? It's because it's written into the story, right? And it's written into the story because it's an adequate model of the person that predicts what they're going to do next. And the same thing is true for us. So it's basically a story that our brain is writing. It's not written in words. It's written in perceptual content, basically multimedia content. And it's a model of what the person would feel if it existed. So it's a virtual person. And you and me happen to be this virtual person. So this virtual person gets access to the language center and talks about the sky being blue. And this is us.
But hold on a second. Do I exist in your simulation?
You do exist in an almost similar way as me. So there are internal states that that are less accessible for me that you have, and so on. And my model might not be completely adequate. There are also things that I might perceive about you that you don't perceive. But in some sense, both you and me are some puppets, two puppets that enact a play in my mind. And I identify with one of them because I can control one of the puppet directly. And with the other one, I can create things in between. So for instance, we can go on an interaction that even leads to a coupling, to a feedback loop. So we can think things together in a certain way or feel things together. But this coupling is itself not a physical phenomenon. It's entirely a software phenomenon. It's the result of two different implementations interacting with each other.
Like, why doesn't your mind have access to my mind's full state? Like,
for the same reason that my mind doesn't have access to its own full state.
So what, there
is no trick involved. So basically, when I know something about myself, it's because I made a model. Yes, so one part of your brain is tasked with modeling what other parts of your brain are doing.
Yes.